I'm so pleased to introduce our speaker this morning, Tom Thibodeau. Tom is the Distinguished Professor of Servant Leadership at Viterbo University, where he has been teaching for 42 years. He is a husband, father, grandfather, teacher, active community member, author, and part owner of a country tavern. Please welcome Tom Thibodeau.
But when you're in the presence of good people, there's joy. There's joy here. We need to gather, and we need to continue to gather. A poem. The moment. A war is brewing. It's nothing new. It's Civil Rights 2.0. A fight of you versus truth, weakness disguised as power, people treated as worthless poker chips, using children to make a point, and bros going all out on a power trip. A revolution is coming, a reckoning of care, a realization, a reason to do more than just stare. People aren't afraid, now they're rightly mad. This period of darkness, it's about to get bad. The sacrifice is an action, pretending it's all good, but this is our moment. Open your eyes, get involved, stand up like you should. The only thing that allows evil to triumph over good is for enough good people to do nothing. That poem was written by my daughter, who sent it to me yesterday. She's working with the Muhammad Ali Foundation on a compassion project. Compassion comes from two Latin words, cum patior, which means to suffer with other people. To suffer with other people. You are a compassionate community, doing good work each and every day. Wherever people are in need, you is present. You are a reflection of the beloved community. What's the story of the gift? The beloved community. I'm a grandfather with 2 grandchildren. If you'd like to see pictures, I've got them. And at Thanksgiving, our granddaughter Addie, who's 8 years of age, was doing some origami. And I said, Addie, you are so thoughtful and kind and sensitive. And she looked up at me and said, don't stop, Papa. And I said, you are thoughtful and creative and joyful. And she said, you missed a word. I said, I did. She said, yeah, it begins with a U and ends with an E. I said, unite? No, Papa, I'm unique. See, what's extraordinary is we're united by our uniqueness. Renee, Liam, Alex. The beloved. Stalin said the death of one person is a tragedy, the death of 1 million is merely a statistic. And the language that's being used by leaders is irreverent because it treats people as objects. Domestic terrorists, agitators, finding any kind of negative act, a descriptor that you can to lessen their humanity. Know their names. Know that they too are someone's beloved as we are the beloved. The way in which you talk to and with each other. Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher, talked about I, thou. I, thou. That the thou in me bows to the thou in you. Over and against I, it. When I reduce you to an object, I've also reduced my own self to an object. So you look in terms of what's taking place today, in terms of the lack of reverence, what is that doing to ICE agents? Their families, their communities. Were they not at one point in their lives the beloved as well? What has happened? So as we watch the marches and what's taking place in Minneapolis, the horror that's unfolding because of the pain that's being inflicted, we're also watching the Walk for Peace, where 13 Buddhist monks are walking from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C., and thousands are walking. And as those Buddhist monks are walking, they're not preaching. Every step is a prayer. And they stop and they bow, namaste. literally means that the God in me bows to the God in you. Now you tell me who is acting with reverence, who is building right relationships. This book has been one of the seminal works of everything I teach. Paul Woodruff, The Forgotten Virtue. We actually had him come and speak with us at Viterbo. He's profound in what he talks about, that reverence is a twin sister of justice, recognized by both the Greeks and the Chinese. Think about it for just a moment. If you go to the court of law and the justice walks in, what do we say? All rise. If there's no reverence, there's no justice. Without reverence, you have anarchy. The way in which we greet each other and extend ourselves to each other are acts of reverence. And what's really important is this. This is a reverent community because we teach reverence through ritual. The music was carefully selected and people practiced. Good music is part of a ritual. The way in which we recognize each of these stones recognizes a concern, a pain and a joy in the lives of our fellow beloved. Our lives are ritualized lives, the ways in which we prepare and treat each other. It was my blessing and great gift to be taken care of by Jack Udell for 25 years. And we developed a friendship during that time. And he would come in, and before he'd even walk in, he'd knock. It was a ritual, a sense of reverence. And he'd come in and you sit down and you look me in the eye. And quite honestly asked, how was I doing? Hello, fellow being. I'm here to serve you today. You always treated me with an extraordinary sense of reverence. Now think about it. In medicine, it's the only profession in which one person asks another person to take off their clothes. But without reverence, it would be abuse. Also, I want to remind you of your goodness. I just think of this, and I reminded people of this oftentimes. I came to see you one time, and my weight was 240 pounds. And you said, let's consider this to be your maximum weight. It's an act of reverence. How important that is, that we have this in our lives. It's a balance. It's a political virtue rather than a religious virtue. It's in terms of the differentiation in terms of power. So what we see happening on the streets of America today, we see the brutality. But understand this, in the African American community, and the Native American community, and the Chinese community, these acts have been part of their history, have they not? Yes. Talk to an African American family who has to have the talk with their child. Keep your hands on the steering wheel in case you're stopped by a police officer. It's differentiation and power, because the only thing that protects the powerless is a sense of reverence. Justice is dependent upon that. And when you lose that, what have we lost? Our humanity. How important and significant it is. That's why the artists and the poets and the storytellers always call us a deeper sense of humanity. Hello, fellow human beings. Recognize that all of you are a gift. All of you are part of the beloved community. One of the things that I'm very impressed by, the number of people that are showing up and standing up, even in the midst of terrible cold, willing to stand and be uncomfortable and painful. I would imagine the number of cases of frostbite were extraordinary. But I cannot sit home. The only thing that allows evil to triumph over good is for enough good people to do nothing. Edmund Burke warned against that. What is our greatest adversary is apathy, which I consider to be an act of reverence. When people say, well, I can't imagine what's going on in Minneapolis, what you're basically saying is, I don't care. I can't imagine what's going on in Ukraine right now. What are you saying? I don't care. Why? Because we can't imagine. Our moral imagination understands that nothing that's human is alien to me. Seneca said that. How important and extraordinary it is. We are all connected. And what is it that connects us is a deep sense of reverence that we learn first in our own homes. Paul Woodruff was extraordinary in his insight, and he writes this. Now is a time when phones are ringing around town with calls from telemarketers. Someone somewhere is sitting down to dinner with a family, but not here, not in this house. Dad stopped off on his way home from his workout and ran into some friends. Mom brought Sarah home after soccer and had to turn right around for a meeting. David's over at a friend's house. Now Sarah's on the phone with a friend, her cell phone, not the one that's ringing off the hook. She has TV on in her room, algebra homework spread on her bed, a bag of chips open beside her. She's very responsible. She remembered to feed the dog when she went to her room and closed the door. The dog is not hungry yet, but when she is, she will go over to her dish and eat as much of it as she feels like, as a dog does when it is alone. Food may eventually appear on the table in this house, but it's very unlikely that as many as 2 members of the family will be eating at once. This family will not eat together, hold hands, or pray together before a meal or talk about the day's events. Chances are they'll all go to the respective dishes to feed, like the dog, when they feel like it. Something's missing from these people, something that makes a difference between feeding time and meal time, between a home and a kennel. If you ask them why, they'll answer, well, who has time for family dinner? It's only an empty ritual after all. True. Without reverence, rituals are empty. It's our ritual gathering with each other which teaches us this is what it is to be part of the human family. This is where we learn justice and right relationships and the ways in which we treat each other. Last Monday, I had the privilege of speaking at the Martin Luther King event in Rochester. 400 people gathered for breakfast. It was extraordinary. The first speaker was a Somali imam who said a prayer for peace in Arabic. Next was an evangelical preacher, and she was on fire. And then they had 3 people whose lives had been alterably changed by ICE. A 30-year-old Hispanic woman who was born in this country in Arizona, moved to Austin, Minnesota 29 years ago, was bringing a friend of hers to an appointment at Mayo Clinic. Man worked at Hormel. Before they were even able to get into the parking lot, ICE came over the snowbanks in their big SUVs and pinned her in. She has papers, he has papers. She's a full citizen. He has papers and work permit. Pulled him out of the car. Didn't even allow him to ask questions, pulled her out of the car, terrorized her in terms of threatening, complete lack of reverence, told her to get back in her car and get out of there. She has to drive back to Austin, find his wife, and tell her what had happened. Felt guilty that had taken place. Abused. By the time they were able to kind of track him down, he was already in El Paso, Texas. And this 30-year-old woman, bilingual, has set up a GoFundMe page to try to get him back. A deep sense of reverence. She suffered. But instead of focusing on her own suffering, what is she thinking about? How is it that I can reach out to my brother who is now lost? There was a Guatemalan gentleman who has 3 generations of a restaurant in Rochester. He's going to go out of business because his workers do not want to come to work and his customers don't want to come out to eat. And so what the man is doing is taking his food in his restaurant, preparing it, and bringing it to his neighbors who have nothing to eat. Reverence. Carrie Newcomer, make room at the table for everyone. What do we see happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul? People finding ways in which to feed people who cannot feed themselves. The ritual sharing of a meal that says we belong to each other. Those of you who work at the Warming Center, you realize that other groups come in and bring meals in so that people can eat. You're not only hungry, you're cold, and you're alone. So to be reverent with each other is to welcome them in, to practice, as Martin Luther King would say, a radical hospitality. The imam, I had a chance to have lunch with him. Sitting next to also a Somali man whose 8-year-old boy says, "Dad, can we go out and play?" He said, "Not now, son." And the imam got a call from a Christian church who said, "We're studying Islam. Could we come and visit?" And all of a sudden he wondered, is this a ploy? Am I being used? He said, "But that's not what my faith teaches. My faith in Allah is to welcome others." And so he said, "Come and visit." And they came and they visited, said prayer, were there for prayers, and then he got tea and biscuits and said, "Please, let's eat and drink together." And the guests were just shocked. And he said, "This is who we are." Well, how is it that you gather people here together? I just listened to you talk about the number of meals that you have together, gathering and making sure that you're all fed. Extraordinary. Imam had told a story about a 13-year-old girl, 13-year-old Somali girl going to get her epilepsy medicine, was abducted by ICE, thrown into a cell, had an epileptic seizure, cracked her head against the wall, and then they let her out. Elie Wiesel, great Nobel Peace Prize laureate, said this: "Evil is anything that makes a child suffer." What protects children? It's reverence. They are beloved, unique in their gifts and their abilities. How extraordinary is this? And this is what's terribly important for teachers. Having a sense of reverence. You can't teach somebody if you don't have respect for them. You can't be a teacher unless you have the reverence and humility to understand that your students are there to teach you. How important it is to understand the representation and mutuality that comes with being human. Extraordinary in its practice. Ceremony joins leaders and followers in a common reverence and reminds them that they hold certain ideals of awe together. Ceremony, especially important among the military, among those entrusted with the use of violence. Ceremony marks the difference in virtue between a band of criminals and a legitimate fighting force. And what we see happening on the streets of Minneapolis is criminal behavior. Under any other circumstances would be published in a court of law. The lack of reverence says that you are held accountable to justice. Ceremony is present in many areas of our lives, Woodruff writes, such as the classroom and the home, but it's most obvious in the military because of the way in which elements of ceremony or ritual separate military from civilian life. We have a way of not noticing the ceremonies of civilian life unless we're observing cultures we think exotic. This is because the military has two special reasons for cultivating virtue. Military people hold the principal tools of violence and are severely hierarchical. The greater the powers that are put into your hands, the more important it is for you to develop the inner restraints against the abuse of power. So I have to ask myself, I am a person of extreme privilege. I'm over 70 years of age. I've had the best of what this country has had to offer. Family, education, healthcare, democratic institutions that have served me and my family for a lifetime. What now is my level of responsibility? What am I willing to do with the power that I have been given? How is it that I am committed to building the beloved community. Three things. One, faith. Be people of faith is to have trust in each other. I have faith in you. You were there to make sure that my health was being protected and respected. And that level of trust continues today, even though we're not seeing each other on a regular basis. You have faith in each other. You trust each other. You welcome the stranger like no other organization in town. To develop that sense of trust, every time you play music, you bring people together, and people trust not only your competence, Terry, but your compassion. It's a secret sauce in our community to gather in the company of strangers like you did this week and trusted that you'd be protected by fellow human beings. Develop that level. Second, hope. This summer, I went to a funeral. Very good friend of mine, a dairy farmer out in Hillsboro. His 12-year-old grandson was killed in an ATV accident in his driveway. He hit a patch of gravel, ATV flipped over, the young boy was killed. 7 months previous, I had been at the funeral of his son-in-law who died of stomach cancer. His son-in-law was a mechanical wizard, and he fixed every tractor in the area. In fact, the more difficult the mechanical problem, the better he liked it. I went to his funeral at a church out in the country outside of Hillsboro, and the whole yard was filled with tractors. Everybody whose tractor he had fixed drove their tractors to the funeral, and after the funeral drove their tractors into Hillsboro Tractorcade to celebrate this man's good life and his good work and the impact that he had in the community. And now their nephew, grandson, was killed. I stood for an hour and a half in the parking lot of Hillsboro to get into the high school. The whole town and community came. The beloved community came because they knew how much this family had suffered. A deep sense of reverence for who they are and what they contributed to their lives. And the family was extraordinary, put together a slide presentation of this little boy's life. He was so alive. But what they did it for was not only for themselves, but for his classmates. All those 12-year-olds who were experiencing death for the first time. Surrounded by a beloved community who did not want their children to suffer, but were not going to allow them to suffer alone. Much like Liam's parents and Liam's community, that 5-year-old. It was extraordinary. And the pastor got up to speak. And he recited this poem. And I've just been struck by these words, and I hold on to them each and every day. He says, people speak of hope as if it were a delicate, ephemeral thing and made of whispers and spider webs. It's not. Hope has dirt on her face, blood on her knuckles, the grit of the cobblestones in her hair, and just spat out a tooth as she rises for another goal. Hope. Dirt on her face, blood on her knuckles. Augustine in the 4th century said, hope has two daughters, anger and courage. We must be angry with injustice and have the courage to change it. The courage to embrace it. The courage to smother it with nonviolent action. And finally, love. To extend ourselves for the good of one another. Service is love made visible. How about the people who got here early this morning to make sure we're going to have hot coffee afterwards? All the people who serve us each and every day. Think of those people right now whose car can't get started, and they call a guy who comes on a trip who's been out for 12 hours already starting cars. Think about EMTs who are willing to kind of take trips. Think about in terms of law enforcement, firefighters, and EMTs in Minneapolis, St. Paul right now who have a commitment to their neighbors and fellow citizens. Service is love made visible. You are a servant community. You are people of great faith. You believe and trust in each other. You hold on to hope, and you demonstrate it in the way in which you love. Good work, hard work, noble work, your work, and you do it so well. Thank you.